right before my diagnosis, like maybe a month or so before, I had wrapped up a year-long artist residency in Chicago. It was a drawing and painting residency, so basically like for a year I was sponsored by an art center in the city to like create a body of work and teach and like do all the artist things. So I'd created this like whole body of work, these paintings around narratives that had no definitive like beginning or end, but they were just like these constantly looping, like repeating stories. So one of them was like about this girl whose like hair like just didn't stop growing. Like she just became like tangled in everything around her, and then she would like cut all her hair off and was like liberated, but then her like hair would start growing again and she would like do it again and then cut it off. So I had like 3 different stories that had that same structure, that is actually like the cycle of OCD. A few months later, I'm like, oh, that's me. Like I very much knew what I was dealing with before I had words for it. So I think that also speaks to the power of like art to express things that you can't put into words. When I feel like I was finally rounding the curve and starting to really get better is when COVID hit. So that really threw like my whole recovery for a loop. One of the worst things that can happen for someone who has mental health issues is to be isolated and to not be able to engage in like routine, and like I couldn't go like work out at the gym. I couldn't go meet up with my friends. So yeah, that was just like not a good thing to throw in the mix. So I started working with this agent in the beginning of COVID, and I released a series of drawings at the time that all portrayed, I think, how a lot of us felt, really isolated. It was, all of the drawings were simply just a figure and the motif of like thread and yarn, having the figure kind of like tied up or constricted. Again, I think a sentiment that we all connect to when we think about like early COVID times. And then in the last year, so like 1 year out from the last release I did with him, I started introducing more figures into my compositions, to kind of explore this idea of going from solitude to reintroducing yourself, or like re-socializing after a period of prolonged isolation. I made the decision to come back home temporarily at first, just because we were going through our second lockdown in Chicago, and I was like, I can't go through this again by myself, because like I don't have any family in Chicago. It was just me. So I drove down here. I stayed with my family for a few months, and then I was like, you know what, I think it's just better for me to be here. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, step back, high plank. This is our first high plank of class climb. That's actually when I did my 200-hour teacher training. So it was a very transitional point of my life. Feet behind your wrists, ragdoll forward fold. Opposite hands grab opposite elbows here. Release the crown. As a teacher, you're usually able to, you're basically an energy gauge throughout the class, and like some days you walk in and your students, you feel like maybe excited energy or anxious energy or like unsettled energy. And then by the end of it, when you get to Shavasana, at least for me as a teacher, that's when I can really gauge like, did we move some energy here? Like, did we get to a calmer space? And it's just really satisfying when you feel that like tension break, when everyone can just be still. That's very, like, it's a very gratifying thing as a teacher. My driving force, whether it's with my my art or with like my yoga teaching and facilitating like this space, is to connect people with resources that might improve their life. So like with my art, I always try to orient it towards themes of mental health and wellness, whether that's like different nonprofits or just like educational resources. I always try and have my art like act as a bridge between the lay person and like the resources they might need. And then with yoga, I feel like yoga for so many people like is a resource that can like improve or like even save their lives. So I think that I'm using visuals to like bring people into something that might benefit their well-being.